Picture this, a classroom full of students, hands over their hearts, all reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. It's a scene that feels quintessentially American, something that's played out for generations. But the story behind those words? Well, it is anything but simple. I mean, the pledge feels like it's been around forever, right? It's this bedrock civic ritual, something millions of us have said since all the way back in 1892. And on the surface, it's just a simple statement of patriotism. But what if I told you that this familiar ritual has a secret history? One that is way more radical, more commercial, and honestly, a lot more controversial than you were probably ever taught in school. To really get it, we have to go back to the very beginning. And trust me, it's a surprising origin story. We're talking about the 1890s. This was the Gilded Age, an era of explosive industrial growth. But it was also a time of corporate robber barons, massive widening inequality, and some really intense social conflict. And here is surprise number one, the guy who actually wrote the pledge. His name was Francis Bellamy. He wasn't a politician, he wasn't a military general, he was a Baptist minister and a prominent Christian socialist. In fact, he'd just been pushed out of his church for giving sermons that basically called Jesus a socialist. So what does Christian socialism even mean? Well, back then, it was this belief that Jesus' teachings, if you really followed them, would logically lead you to socialism. The idea was that out-of-control capitalism was a betrayal of America's promise, and that a truly Christian society needed a much more equal distribution of wealth. And this is where the story takes a really wild turn. Because for all of Bellamy's high-minded ideals, the Pledge of Allegiance was actually created as a marketing gimmick. He wrote it when he was working for a popular magazine, The Youth's Companion, as part of a huge campaign to sell American flags to public schools. Bellamy's first draft was even more radical. He originally wanted to put in the famous slogan of the French Revolution, liberty, equality, fraternity. But he ended up deciding against it, writing later that it would be too fanciful, especially since so many powerful people at the time were against equality for women and African Americans. So he settled for that famous line we all know, with liberty and justice for all. But it wasn't just the words that were different back then. Oh, no. There was also the original and now totally forgotten salute that went along with it. Okay, so when the pledge first came out in 1892, it came with very specific instructions. You'd start with a military salute. Then, when you said the words, "To my flag," you'd extend your right arm straight out, palm up towards the flag, and you'd hold it there till the end. This was known as the Bellamy salute. And for decades, this is exactly how American kids saluted the flag. But fast forward to the 1920s and 30s, and this very gesture starts to develop let's call it an uncomfortable resemblance to something else happening over in Europe. As fascism was on the rise, both Italian fascists and German Nazis adopted a very, very similar-looking straight-arm salute, which they claimed was some kind of revival of an ancient Roman gesture. Yeah, you can see the problem. The similarity between the American Bellamy salute and the Nazi salute was just striking. It created this huge national controversy. And as the U.S. got closer and closer to war with Germany and Italy, the optics became completely impossible. So something had to give. In 1942, not long after the U.S. officially entered World War II, Congress decided a change was desperately needed. Groups like the American Legion were pushing for a change, and Congress listened. They officially amended the flag code, getting rid of the outstretched arm and replacing it with the hand-over-heart gesture that we all use today. But the salute wasn't the only part of the pledge that's been changed. The words themselves have been a political battleground over the years, really reflecting the country's changing anxieties. The text has gone through a few key revisions. You've got the original 22-word pledge from 1892. Then a big change happens in 1923, and of course the most famous edition came much later, in 1954. Let's just put them side by side for a second. The original says, "I pledge allegiance to my flag," and you'll notice, no mention of God. The modern pledge, as you can see, is a bit longer and a lot more specific. So why that first change? Well, in 1923, there was a lot of anti-immigrant sentiment in the country, and the words, "my flag," were changed to "the flag of the United States." The reason was pretty explicit, to make absolutely sure that recent immigrants knew which flag they were supposed to be saluting. Francis Bellamy, who was an old man by then, actually hated the change, but he was overruled. And then, of course, came the most significant change of all. The words "under God" were added in 1954, right at the peak of the Cold War. This was the result of a big campaign by the Knights of Columbus, who wanted to draw a sharp line between the U.S. and what they called godless communism. President Eisenhower signed it into law, and that gave us the version we have today. So when you put all these pieces together, what do you really have? It's not some timeless, unchanging text. It's a constantly evolving, heavily contested symbol. I mean, think about it. The Pledge of Allegiance has had so many different lives. It started out as a marketing tool. It was born from a Christian socialist dream of a more equal America. It became a national ritual with a salute that had to be scrapped because it looked too much like a fascist gesture. And then it was changed again to be a declaration of faith in the Cold War. It's like a mirror, reflecting America's changing anxieties over time. Which really leaves us with one last thought. This simple pledge has been molded by commerce, by ideology, by war, and by religion. So when a national symbol's meaning is always in flux, who actually gets to decide what it stands for today?